All right, God is good?
All the time.
And all the time.
God is good.
All right, good. God is good all the time, and all the time He's good. That is good. Well, before we begin, I am learning well from Rick. Rick did his commercial last night, so I'm doing mine right now. So this is commercial time. 3 years ago, we had a desire to go and be closer to our daughter. We have a daughter that had breast cancer, and she lived in Holmes County, Ohio. We lived in New York City. So we wanted to go and be closer with her, but as we will share later on, going from New York City to Ohio, Holmes County is like, it's night and day. So that's one. The second one is, we have two sons at home. One is 6'5", a lot of pounds. The other one is 6'3", and a big guy. So two large African American young men move into a community. You have to be careful where you go, not knowing if you'll be accepted. Now, if we're looking for a house, sometimes you look for a house where it's a low crime area. We have to look for a house where we feel our sons would not be intimidated or would not intimidate someone. So we decided to move from the Empire State to the Buckeye State, but move to Columbus. But while looking for a house to move to Columbus, we found this place. When we went to it, it looks good. It had all the things we needed. The only problem was my wife thought it was too much in the boonies because it was set back in the woods. But I had a vision that someday God will open up a place for us to have family retreats. Because with 6 children, we always wanted to retreat but couldn't afford it. For the last 17 years, we've been doing marriage retreats in the US and around the world. So, this is a good place. But when we found this place, upstairs of the garage looked like this, and the guy told me, if you would fix it up, you on your own. And I told him what we want to do. We want to do a ministry. We want a place people can come and don't worry about what it costs. They can leave a donation if they have. If they don't have, no problem. So we decided, well, this room could look a little bit better, so we changed this room to what this looks like now. The second one was this. The color was a little bit loud for some of the ladies, so we toned it down and put a bed inside of there and make it a place of luxury. And we kept going from room to room. This was the basement. An open area, we turned it into a bedroom. And by the time we were done, we had 7 bedrooms. 7 bedrooms in the home. And what is it for? For family, for marriage retreats, for pastors and their leadership retreats, for fathers and sons retreat, for mothers and daughters retreat, for ladies retreat. And in the winter months, the spring and the fall, for youth retreats. But the main emphasis is on family and marriage. So once a month, we do a marriage retreat, my wife and I, and we pamper the couples. You come in on Friday, you get all your meals. Saturday night, we have a romantic dinner. You dress up, smell nice, look nice, and we have games and fun time. We finish up on Sunday. And there is no cost, there's no donation. It's just a blessing. Because marriage is on the attack, families are under the attack, and we want to be able to walk along with couples and walk along with families. So that's what we have in Ohio. So if you're looking for someplace to go and you want to go this summer, find someplace else. This is all booked up until September. But if you want to come next year, summer, we got a lot of opening. But if you want to come in the springtime, you can come. In the fall, you can come in the wintertime. So that's what we're about. That's our ministry. This is the house. And we have some brochures we're going to leave in the back. And this is the big seller in the summer. Saltwater pool, 9 feet on one end, 2 on the other end. You can even hang out late at night. And I'm going to just run through some of the pictures here. We have volleyball, the Mennonite #1 sport, and for the lesser extent, basketball, and frisbee golf, and I mean, you name it, we got it out there. The only thing we do not have that you may need, or you may want, is Wi-Fi. And the reason why we don't want Wi-Fi, we don't want Facebook. We want face-to-face. You know, sitting around the fireplace and talking and chatting. But that's our retreat place. So if you ever want a place to go, it's in Thornville, close to Zanesville, 40 miles from Columbus. So that's my commercial break. This is one of our couples retreat, 7 couples, making a small group, some Russian Mennonites that come from Canada, and we just administer. So we'll leave some brochures in the back there, and that's, like I said, it's a free place to come, a place you could just kind of rekindle the fire for couples and draw closer as families. Well, let's talk about our journey. Well, many years ago, I was born in the island of Trinidad. How many of you know where Trinidad is? Trinidad and Tobago? 1, 2. Yeah, one time I asked a question, the guy said, yep, I know where it is. It's just 7 miles outside the coast of New Zealand. And he knew what we was talking about, so I said, yeah, sure, right. And I left him to that because he knew. Well, it's 7 miles from the coast of Venezuela. It's Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada. We're just kind of close to each other. Well, growing up in Trinidad, we were a country where we got independence in 1962. But before that, in 1831, slavery was abolished in the island of Trinidad. They had slaves there, they brought from Africa. And when slavery was abolished, they needed workers. So the slaves had to work for 6 more years without pay before they could be fully released. Well, they revolted 2 years after, and they had to make a quick stop to slavery and free labor. Well, we lived in Trinidad, and that was a good life until around 1982. 1982, I went to New York City. I was involved in drugs and alcohol and adultery. The things of the world attracted me because I was looking for love, but I was looking for love in all the wrong places. When I was a baby, I was told my mom tried to kill me because she had an affair with a man that wasn't her husband, and I came forth the fruit of that sin. Well, I was always looking for love. I didn't grow up with my mom. I grew up part-time with my dad, and I was always running around looking, searching. The drugs didn't do it, the alcohol didn't do it, the women didn't do it, until I found Jesus Christ. To fast forward a little bit, in 1982, we moved to New York City. I came to New York City, loved New York City. The party life, the drinking, the drugs, I mean, all the things that sin had to offer, New York City was offering it. And I thought this would settle it. This will fill that gap, that hole that I had inside of me. The love I was looking for, I didn't find in a mother. The love I was looking for, I didn't find in a father. So I thought this would be what I needed. But it didn't help much. But I thought it was nice. My wife, on the other hand, she got saved before I did in the island of Trinidad. She will tell her story. And when she got saved and came home and told me she got saved, I was not impressed. See, because I knew 2 types of Christians. They were one that drink, smoke, had drugs with me on Friday and Saturday night, and Sunday morning, they invited me to church. The second Christian I knew was the one that walked around with a big Bible, like Jesus I love and no one else. Very sad countenance, and I was always the fun of the party. I was a talker, I was a joke maker. I didn't want to be a Christian. I didn't want to live that life. So my life continued until we moved to New York City. My wife also coming along with me.
Is this on? Yes. I can never speak loud enough in that one. As he said, I too was born in Trinidad to a single mom. My dad was married when I was born, and he already had 7 children with his wife. I also have three other siblings with, that is my father's children, but not my mom's children. So I was born and raised in Trinidad, and it was a difficult life in a sense because my single mom had nowhere to live for a long time, excuse me, and we moved from place to place. When I was 8 years old, almost 9, she began a relationship with the man who would become my stepfather, and who I lived in the same home with then until I got married to Daniel. My mom then had 2 other children. And then before she had these 2 other children with my stepfather, she also had 2 other children after me. So growing up, it was, I had a hard time with the fact that my father was a pharmacist, and so he supported me monthly, but the relationship we had was me going to the pharmacy and getting that support every month. We really didn't have a deep talking relationship. So coupled with the fact that I didn't have a good relationship with my father, and I saw my mom being hurt by men, at a very young age I made up my mind that I would not be dependent on a man. And so I decided that I would go to school, graduate, get a job, so I would support myself. Reality is, making that vow that day, I would have also been with God in my plans not to depend on a man, because God is a man. So that would lead me later on to discovering some hardships in my journey towards surrender to Christ. When I was 26, and I would have had, we would have been married for, I got married when I was almost 18.
17.
I was 18 3 weeks later, but nobody makes me forget that. I had 2 children by then, and one of my best friends at work prayed for me with several other women and invited me to church. And that night she invited me to church. I actually went, answered the altar call, and received Christ. And there has been no regret from that time. I am so grateful. I am so grateful for what God has done for me. And that's why that song that was just playing, the goodness of God, it touches me deep in my spirit, because I know that the goodness of God has been running after me. So I praise Him for that. A little earlier in our workshop, we talked about the fact that growing up in Trinidad, because we had black government there ever since I was a little girl, and even though there was some discrimination with respect to what they call colorism now, with respect to the color of your skin, some people with lighter color skin and white people in Trinidad getting better jobs and being put into the public eyes. Growing up for me, I didn't have issues identifying with my blackness, or you know, I can thank my mom for that. I was very happy in my black skin. And in Trinidad, there was no help, no welfare and stuff like that. So coming to the US, like Daniel talked about earlier, I had to learn the culture, because here I'm not identified as a Trinidadian, a black Trinidadian, or a black Caribbean woman. I'm identified as a black American, and people treated me that way. And so I had some of those prejudices that some people have. People from the Caribbean and people from Africa sometimes have of black Americans, that maybe they're lazy, maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other. So I had to learn the culture here, and that's why when I tell you to learn the culture of the people you're ministering to is important. I had to learn the culture. I had to learn to appreciate what was happening here. I had to learn to identify with the Black Americans here.
Okay, so coming from the island of Trinidad, where we didn't have the racial tension that we heard of in the U.S. in the time of Martin Luther King and beyond. But in Trinidad in 1970, there was awareness that the Americans were drilling all the oil and taking it to America. We were aware that there was a base in the country where Trinidadians were not allowed to go, and there was an uprising. We were aware that in the banks and some of the places of work, according to the color of your skin, if you were light skinned, you get into some of these banks and some of these big corporations. And then there were some demonstrations and things started to change. But when we came to America, it was different. We had to learn everything anew. Like I shared in my earlier session, that to become citizen here, we had to learn American history. There were 100 questions that they could ask you from, and you had to know the history of America. None of the questions had to do with African American history or Native American history or any history of people who have worked hard and helped to build this country. We didn't understand it at first, so we had to learn some of the things. Well, it took us a while, but we got it. Eventually we started understanding what the culture of Black America is and how they are perceived and some of the journeys that they have to endure. Well, it took a couple of years after living in the U.S. and my wife being saved for me to get saved. It took about 2 years, I would think. She would pray for me and pray for me and pray for me, but I didn't want to hear the gospel because I wasn't interested in the gospel. But then God did something to her life that changed. Something that we use right now in our marriage retreat. Husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. Wives, this is the one I love. Submit to your own husband. And when she started submitting, I started seeing a different woman. It was hard for her because I wasn't a Christian, but yet she knew it wasn't for Christian women. It was called for women to submit. And through her submission, God started using that to open my eyes. Till one night, or say one day, my wife was in the train station and this man named Dale Charles. Anyone know who Dale Charles is? Okay, he's right up front here right now. Dale Charles worked in New York City. The work he did was evangelism. He was in the subway at Broadway Junction and he would give out tracts and sell Bibles. My wife asked him for a Bible for me. She wanted an NIV because all she knew was King James, but she heard the NIV was a little more simpler to read. Dale didn't have any NIV, but smart as he is, he said, give me your name, your address, and your phone number, and I will get you one. I'll let my wife finish that story.
After I gave Dale my name and address and so on, I walked away and then I was like, I just gave a strange man in New York City my name and address and phone number. So I prayed, I said, God, if he's not a good man, make him lose it. I want you to know that I think Dale moved out of the city like 10 years ago. And before he moved, he handed me that paper with my name and address still on it. So Dale invited me to the Mennonite church. And at first I was kind of skeptical because I'd never heard of Mennonites. Although there were 2 Mennonite churches.
Let me say something. She would be conservative. But the first time she went there, she came home a little bit not sure what was happening. Because she went to the church and the first thing the guy went up and he blew this little thing. Now she was saved in a Pentecostal church where they were rocking and rolling. And now everybody in white shirt and black pants and they look different. They look strange. But continue.
So anyway, it took me a little while before I went to the church, but Dale was wise and he connected me with a Jamaican girl who was also going to church. And she had 4 boys and 1 girl, and I had 4 girls and 1 boy. And we hit it off, and he began doing Bible studies with us. And they also used wisdom in sending somebody to pick me up, to take me to church the first Sunday I went, because they realized that would make it easier for me to come. I live within walking distance, but I'm sure if Lula didn't come and get me that Sunday, I might have kept putting it off going there. My intention was to go one Sunday and maybe twice a month kind of thing. But from the first Sunday I went, I continued going until we moved to New Jersey 2 years later. There I found, and you know, the title of this talk is really Race, Immigration, and Finding a Home in the Mennonite Church. And that's what I want to talk about right now in this section, finding a home in the Mennonite Church. When I went there, from the very first Sunday, the sense of community, the kind of welcome I got, the people that seemed so interested in me and my children. Daniel wasn't saved and he drove taxis so that he didn't go to church on Sundays with us. It kept me going every Sunday. I also was connected to 2 other women, one from Jamaica and one from the Cameroon in Africa, whose husbands were also unsaved. And we began praying together for our husbands weekly, and we developed such a close friendship and relationship. I also had my first boy when I came to New York, and after having 3 girls, I needed help with disciplining this boy in church, because he didn't sit still like my girls did. And Brother Allen's wife, Carolyn, she was so helpful in helping me with training my son, and the support I got as God began to deal with my heart and submitting to an ungodly husband. The support I got there from these women to continue in that journey is, something that I can't even tell you how grateful I am for that. I often tell Brother Allen that they came to New York for us. They came to New York to plant that church because God knew we needed to hear what the church had to offer. And still now, in looking for a church, the important things for me is a place where I can find community, accountability, and people that will walk alongside me. And I have found that in the Mennonite Church. We now go to church in Plain City, and it is different because in New York, the church is very unique, and it was, how should I say, it's not the typical Mennonite church. Now I go to a typical Mennonite church, and I had to adjust to that, and it is taking time, honestly. So it was easy for me to put my roots down there. I want to be honest, we've had pains, we've had hurts, but if I could have taken the church in New York to me to Ohio, I would have. And I am grateful too for the church we are at in Ohio, United Bethel. They have been very supportive there of our move, and they have been we are finding community here. As all of you know, when you move to a new church, it takes a while to put down roots and to develop the kind of friendships you had afterwards. So that's my story about finding a home in the Mennonite church. The other thing I want to talk about too is that when we came to this country, we were undocumented immigrants. And that was a long journey to getting our green card and to becoming citizens. And I want you to know that there were numerous times when the church applied to the USCIS, which is the Immigration Department, to get our situation straightened out. The journey, there are so many ignorant things sometimes I read on the news or on Facebook about immigrants. I want to make these points, and Daniel might share a little bit on that too. Not all people who are Hispanic are Mexicans. Like all groups, don't stereotype the whole group. Learn to know the individuals. The immigrants are very, very hardworking. They don't come here to take your jobs. They usually do jobs that Americans do not want to do. They work hard. They want to support their families. My daughter has some friends who are Mexicans in Holmes County. They actually own 3 businesses, and yet they're discriminated against and they're talked down to. It's heartbreaking. This country was built by immigrants, and it is hard to see how immigrants are being treated. And the government make the laws and all that, but as people that say we love Jesus, we are called to love the immigrants. We are called to take care of them. We are called to look out for them. Let the government do their job. And what about the church doing its job? What about the church not being the one standing up making all these accusations and saying all these deeply hurtful things?
Well, as my wife said, we want to talk about immigration, then we're going to talk about race, and we'll continue in finding a place in the Mennonite church. Yes, as she said, there's a misconception of immigration. It took us a long, painful time. Now, you could sometimes do things the crooked way and get through pretty easily. But if you want to do it the right way, it's a long process. The government tells you you cannot work for 2 years if you cannot work if you are not a legal citizen. But they said you have to find a job anyway if you want to be a legal citizen. So they tell you one thing you cannot be, and then they tell you what you should be, and now you're trying to decide which one should I really be. And it was a long process. And whenever you would apply and they would deny it, you would lose whatever money you gave, or whatever money you paid. And we wanted to do it the right way. And I remember that I wanted to stand out and to show people that I really want to follow Christ, and that I'm ready and willing to go back to my country. So I started volunteering with the USCIS. I had a friend, we would go on the streets of New York City, and we'll get people to talk about immigration. And we'll bring the immigration department in to talk to these people, because many of these people were going into places and giving lots of money to people who were just taking their money and couldn't do anything for them. So the Attorney General of New York and the USCIS asked if we would be a middle person. They knew my status. They knew that I was looking to become a legal citizen. They knew I wasn't in hiding, and they knew the work and the position I did. And we were able to work with them. But there were many people that were looked down. There were many people that was treated wrongly, that we saw, that we had to go and visit at times. So it is a hard and long process. It's not as it looks, like people just come in and they get all the jobs. And like she said, many of us get a job that nobody wants. But we're looking for a work. We're looking to better our life. And it took a long time, but eventually God opened the door for us. So immigration is a very subject that I know personally about. So what we're telling you tonight is not something we heard or something we read. What we're telling you tonight is something we have lived. Immigration was very hard. Then we had to deal with race. Well, like we said, we came from a different place, and we had to understand the new place that God has brought us to.
I just want to say one last thing on the immigration issue. Because we were undocumented immigrants, and because he worked with the CIS and with undocumented immigrants, we don't know of any undocumented immigrant that voted, got food stamps, or free medical care unless it was an emergency. So those things are not widespread. I'm not saying it probably never happened, but I'm telling you it is not widespread happening in the country. Now the issue about race. Talking to you, it's hard for me at this point, I think, harder than when I spoke on the workshop earlier on because of the situation that happened on Sunday and the things that are being raised right now with the killing of Deshaun Wright. It's hard to have to face those issues again, I tell you the truth. And I want you to understand that for us as Black Americans, we do not just face those issues when it happens Sunday or last year when the issues were raised, or 4 years ago. We face it every day. We face it every day, and I would have told you this later on, but I'll tell you this now. As a Black Mennonite woman, veiled, I have been followed in Mennonite stores in Holmes County. And you know the reason I was followed was because of the color of my skin. The fact that I was veiled did not make me look like an honest woman. The color of my skin indicted me, and that is hard to take. But I want you to understand that, we said it earlier on, we do not support the looting and the rioting. We feel that our Black lives don't matter, and the Black lives of many of those that we know, many of the Black people in this country, doesn't matter. We are not for the organization itself, for some of the things they stand for. We, as Daniel said earlier on, have police officers in our family, past and present, but we know that the police service needs to be retrained and things need to be different. A friend and I was talking just today, and I said to her, if I have to call the police for a member of my family or for anybody who is having a mental health issue, I don't want to call them. Because too many times those who have mental health crisis end up dead when they're called. They need people trained in dealing with mentally ill people so that they don't end up dead when there is a problem. So as I stand before you here tonight, I want you to understand this. If you've never heard it before, racism is a sin. I say it again, racism is a sin. And that's why we do not understand why the church is so silent. And when I say the church, I'm not talking about a local church. I'm talking about the Church of Jesus Christ. I'm talking especially to Anabaptist people who are sitting here. Why is the church silent when there's the sin of racism among us? Why is it when the things happened last year, or now, and it's so painful, you will hear them talk about, well, they shouldn't be rioting and looting and we should pray for that. But there's nothing said. Nothing said. Instead, people look for reasons why it was okay for these men to die. If these men were sinning, we should be weeping that they died without Christ. Why are we feeling happy or feeling justified that these men died and they were wrong and they were bad and they had done all these bad things, so somehow it's okay to kill them? Wake up, people. Racism is a sin. And we need to be weeping over this, not being silent about it.
So while we're speaking now, well, I'll share with you a couple of stories. As many of you know, we have been in the Mennonite Church for almost 30 years. And for that time, we have traveled all over the country. We're probably lacking about 4 states, and then we have completed the whole of the U.S. Traveling all the way to California. But I remember a couple of times traveling and some of the incidents that happened. At one time, we were in South Carolina. We were going to Mississippi. Well, we were going through Mississippi and we were going to Texas. And we had a friend who said, if we know some people in Mississippi, they're good Christians, I'll call and find out if you can spend the night. Now we have 3 daughters and 3 sons. So we all loaded up in the van and we were heading to Mississippi. But before we left, we called the folks we were going to stay at and we said, hey, listen, we're going to get there a little late, maybe around 10 p.m. And the man says, I'll be on the main road, which is about a mile from my house, and I'll be sleeping in my car waiting for when you get there. I said, just wait to the house, just give us direction. He says, no, my neighbor is a Christian, but if you would knock on their door and they realize that you're a black man, you could get shot. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, this is the South. Well, that night we got in there around 11 p.m. and there this man was in his car, sleeping in his car, waiting for us because he feared for our lives. So you say that doesn't sound too bad, but in Mississippi itself, I went back the second time. Mennonite home, Mennonite church, for a wedding. And I was sitting in a Mennonite home, and the lady of the home said, you know, my son do not go to the Mennonite church anymore. I said, does he go to church? Yes. That's okay. She said, but you would not be allowed to go to his church. So what do you mean I would not be allowed? Now I start pretending ignorance. I don't know what she's talking about. She said, well, this is the South. Oh, people from North cannot fellowship in the South in this church. No. Well, and she went on, and as she go on, I went on, and we kept going. Till eventually she said, because of the color of your skin. And I thought to myself, I heard stories like that. This is the church. I said, I need to talk to the pastor. She called her son and she told him. And he said, sure, I'll call pastor. She called him up. It's from a Baptist church, and he came. And he sat with me and I asked him the question, why can't I come to your church? And he said, I don't have any problem with you coming. He said, but when I came to this church, they told me, don't allow any black people to come to the church. So why? Well, because when one family comes, they bring the next and the next and the next, and then they take over the church. And I said, great, go start a lot of churches like that. I said, but anyway, tomorrow is Sunday, and I want to come to your church. I want to meet the deacon and give him a big hug and tell him, Jesus loves you, and so do I. And my wife said, no, you're not going to do it. This is the South. So, sounds great. This was a Baptist church. Well, the next time we went back to South Carolina, this was a Mennonite church in the BMA. And there was the BMA conference. And a young man that picked me up at the airport, we were talking, and he said, you know, we go over on the south side, we witness the colored people. I said, first begin with, we're not colored. I said, you are colored. Because if you slap me, I stay black. If I slap you, you change color. When you start blushing, you change color. You change color all the time. I stay black. I don't go for a tan because I'm already tanned or coffee. Well, that settled that part of the argument. But then he said, well, see, we witness over on the other side, but we don't allow them to come to church with us. So we mean you don't allow them. Well, we don't let them come to our church. So, oh, I thought it was the Church of Jesus Christ, but it's your church. So, well, no, but you know, they're different. So don't you think you can learn from them? And they can learn from you? I've learned a lot in the Mennonite church. I've learned a lot in the Assemblies of God church. Because we have traveled to different churches when we lived in New Jersey. And I said, couldn't you? This was a Mennonite man was telling me. So I said to him, you know, when we get to heaven, would you have your own little Mennonite group in this little room? And then the Baptists will be over there. And God is using this as a preparation for us. That we could all come together and serve Him. So when we get to heaven, we'll all be together in the same place. So there is. So driving through Alabama, could you imagine at night the fear I had because of the stories I've heard and what I have read? It was difficult. My question to you before my wife continue is, many of you are pretty young, but the older ones, have you ever sat with your son and said, listen, son, when you get a driver's license, be very careful how you drive. When you're stopped by the police, be sure to turn off the engine, turn on the inside light, put your hand on the dashboard, turn your windows down, and relax. Be very polite. Don't do anything or say anything that might disturb the police officer. Do you have to talk to your children about not running in New York City? Like my sons, we tell them, don't run from the train station even if it's raining, because you might be caught and stopped by a police officer because a black man running is dangerous. Running while being black, not just driving. And we had to sit and talk to our children about many things that many of you would not have to have heard. Your parents never had to tell you, never had to teach you about the difference of when you go into the store. Do not pick up something, do not touch anything, because they're watching you. Do not touch, do not pick it up, keep your hand to your side, and when you buy something, be sure to keep your receipt. Because my wife says, you'll be judged because of the color of your skin.
So, if racism is a sin, the answer to racism is the gospel. We have the answer. The gospel confronts the self-centeredness of our hearts. It points to the one who transforms the heart from self-centeredness to God-centeredness, from caring only about ourselves to caring about others. We can't let politics alone speak on these issues. They should not be the only ones to have a voice. So the wall of hostility increases in churches and families, and we can call out the failures and sins while acknowledging the reality of the issues that people are facing and offer kingdom solutions to those issues. So please don't fall in the trap that there is only one way to solve this issue. It is not only through laws and politics. We as Christians, as Jesus lovers, we have the answers for that sin. We know that one way is to start by repenting, but I'll talk about that after. So what can you do? Begin to listen to stories. We've talked a little bit about that earlier, from minorities that tell about their experiences. You may hear some of them tell stories that confirm what you believe about black people, like many of you have listened to Candace Owens, or others like that. I am not disputing Candace's experiences, but I'll tell you this, it is not my experience, it is not the experience of many black people in these United States. So if you have a friend who confirms the biases you have, or says the things that you believe, find other people who don't believe what you believe and listen to them as well. It is important to have a balanced view. Much work is still needed to bridge the racial gap. And it is essential as Christians, as individuals, and as churches together, that we seek to, that we serve as a critical voice for racial unity and justice. How can Christians carry on as usual when our churches remain deeply segregated and when the country remains plagued and impacted by the sin of racism? So here are some suggestions. Ask God to search our hearts. In a society with significant racial barriers and divisions, possessing racial prejudice is more prevalent than commonly perceived. And I am grateful for Facebook. Why? Because it's through Facebook I realized how many people I counted as friends had so many racist views. We would not have known if it wasn't for Facebook. Psalm 139 verse 33 says about asking God to search our hearts. What is in my heart, Lord? Reveal the heart issues and ask this Holy Spirit to root those out. Listen and learn. Listen to our pain without the intention to pass judgment, to provide solutions or defend your current thoughts on the situation at hand. Condemn and challenge racism. The church must remain a strong, visible voice for racial justice, unity, and equity. Let's not wait for another shooting, and I wrote this months ago, but let us condemn and challenge racism now. Let it be consistent. The jokes in your office, at your school, when you get together, on your job that are racist, but you laugh at it and you say nothing. The posts on Facebook that are openly racist. Talk to the person when you see them or send them a private message. You begin to be the change. Our silence when this happens makes us complicit and demonstrates our indifference or tolerance and participation in injustice. Protect those who are vulnerable and minister to the needs of those suffering here in our country, not just those overseas. Not just those that you go to missions overseas, but protect those that are here. Don't deny the cries of your brothers and sisters in pain while carrying on in life. And lastly, we must pray. We have been praying, but pray, and pray some more for God to heal our land, to bring the sin of racism to an end in our churches, in our communities, and in our nation.
The Bible says that we should love our Lord, our God, with all our heart, all our soul, all our might, all our strength. To love your neighbor as you love yourself. But Jesus came with a new commandment. He says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love your neighbors, or you love your friends, or you love people as I have loved you. How does he love us? With an agape love. With a love that even while we were yet sinners, he died for us. So before we criticize and condemn people, what would Jesus do? How would he love them? We want to close in a very positive way by saying there's a lot of people that have really encouraged us as we go through this time. In the last month, we have been to 2 different churches and sharing our journey through immigration, through race, and finding a home in the Mennonite church. And many have come and talked to us and said, we didn't know this still happened. We were blinded. You know, we live in this little country, in this bubble, and we didn't realize it was still happening in America. And we're sharing this not because we're trying to cause problem, it's because we're trying to help with the problem. As my wife says, you know us. You know me. You know my wife. If something happened, we will tell you. Because our first and our only allegiance is to Jesus Christ. See, because when we die, this color of skin would not be of significance anymore. We'll be given a new body. And because of that, Jesus Christ must be the first in our life. And I want to thank so many of you that has encouraged us and blessed us and prayed for us. There are many from New York City that have wrote words of encouragement. There were times when there was debate going on Facebook, and I would even go into the debate. But there were those who were standing with us and said, we feel your pain. We understand you. Because I don't go around talking race or talking the things that would cause division. I try to be sure that what I'm saying is something that is of God. It's not of me. It's not just myself. So again, those of you that are working in communities, you say, well, the community I'm working in is not mainly African Americans. Maybe it's a Hispanic community. Know them, understand their culture, talk to them, listen to them. They have a voice. Listen to what they're saying. And before you start rebuking them and chastising them, listen to what they have to say. Don't always have a word to kind of condemn, but to listen. Because many of them, all they need for you to do is to listen. When all this was happening last year with COVID and everything was becoming political, and I couldn't say anything because then I'm Democrat or I'm Republican. And we allow the 2 kingdoms, that we believe that there are 2 kingdoms, and we start fighting against God's kingdom with the kingdom of this world people. So let us as Christians stand out. Many of you are taking a chance and going out because you believe God has called you. Do not hold back. As my wife said, do not laugh at the jokes. Some of the things that you know, when it's wrong, it's wrong. I'll tell you one last thing before I leave. And that is to know that as we continue in this journey in life, as I have looked back on my life, the many people that made a difference in my life. I shared with you how my wife found Dale. The night I got saved, Dale Charles was there also. Cold, rainy Thursday night. There's a lot of more things he could have done. But a soul was saved. A life was transformed. And today, God continues to get the glory. God bless you and thank you.